The story begins inside a room with rotten food and bottles of piss lying around. The curtains had been shut for 3 months straight, and the door handle saw more spiders than humans. Inside, Seung-gi wasted away designing video game maps. He would rather live in this dump of his own making because he believed the world had betrayed him. At that moment, Seung-gi's dad banged on the door, hoping to convince his son to come out. When his father had had enough, he called to his girlfriend to grab a hammer. However, his girlfriend, Daejong, was a money-sucking parasite who had Namjoon-si wrapped around her finger. She convinced Namjoon-si to leave his son alone while they went out to dinner instead. The love-drunk fool even agreed to use Seung-gi's university savings to buy Daejong a bag instead. These were the first set of people to betray Seung-gi. After, Seung-gi received a text from Seung H1 telling him to come to school so he could get a free whooping. This was the second fool to betray him. 3 months ago, Seung-gi was getting pounded by a bunch of school bullies. Before they could go in for round 2, Seung-gi grabbed Seung H1's shoe and asked for his help since they were friends in a previous school. Seung H1 remembered what he said was true, but the other bullies started clowning him for being weak. Seung H1 immediately kicked Seung-gi aside and held him down while he punched his face repeatedly. The bullies encouraged Seung H1 to continue until Seung-gi's face was swollen and full of blood. After he delivered the last blow, Seung H1 warned Seung-gi never to call him his friend so he wouldn't become a loser like him. In the present, Seung-gi had just finished creating a new hell map. He had become pretty good at it, and at least his computer could not betray him like everyone else. Seung-gi uploaded his new map to the public who were eager to try it out. He then got into bed and cried, hoping he wouldn't be betrayed again if he just stayed in his room. Later that night, Seung-gi woke up and decided to check the reviews for the new map he created. Everyone seemed to love the new hell map, which made Seung-gi satisfied. Suddenly, Seung-gi noticed a new message on his screen. The player claimed that his map was second to none, except the real hell, and asked if he could come over. Seung-gi thought it was weird and wondered how the player knew where he lived when a ball of fire suddenly appeared in his room. From it, a great demon emerged, calling himself Baphomet. Seung-gi figured he must be losing his mind, but the demon grabbed him and assured him he was the real deal. At this, Seung-gi panicked and tried to escape, but Baphomet warned him to calm down, or he'd swallow his brain like his mother swallowed his siblings. Moments later, Seung-gi calmly sat with Baphomet and offered him a drink while he asked what he wanted with his hell map. Baphomet commended him on having quite a talent. His hell map gave players a glimpse of hope even though there was no chance of escape. Instead, the players suffered through constant traps to torment them. Yet, despite the cruelty, the map maintained a sense of dignity. Seung-gi was surprised to hear these since he only created the map out of resentment. Baphomet then explained that Hell had become overpopulated and was due for expansion soon. Since Baphomet was chosen as the master of the new Hell, he wanted Seung-gi to build it for him. However, Seung-gi refused, saying he had seen Ghost Rider and nothing good ever came from skeletons from Hell. Baphomet was surprised Seung-gi wanted to continue his life as literal trash, so he said he had one more offer. If the new Hell is constructed, they'd need to make sure it runs correctly. This means Seung-gi would be granted the right to imprison any sinner he wants. For the last time, Baphomet offers Seung-gi the key to show all the people who caused him pain the hell he created. Upon hearing this, Seung-gi realized there was no point in his self-loathing and agreed to do it. He grabbed the key and realized he'd do anything to get revenge on those treacherous bastards. Even Baphomet was surprised by how quickly Seung-gi agreed, but now the contract had been established. After this, Baphomet informs Seung-gi he can create any kind of hell he wants as long as it meets 2 conditions. First, the hell must be named after a sin that the prisoner must be guilty of. For instance, hell of greed or hell of lies. However, since both of those hells already exist, Seung-gi will have to use a different crime. At this, Seung-gi realizes he'll have to choose something that his targets are guilty of. As for the second condition, hell must be completely inescapable. Baphomet explains that hell is meant to torment sinners forever, so if a sinner escapes, the hell will disappear forever and the demon in charge will die. Seung-gi points out that Baphomet will be responsible if his hell has a loophole, so Baphomet assures him that if he were to die, he would destroy Seung-gi's soul before that happens. Once Seung-gi gets the message, Baphomet snaps his fingers to provide the tools. Suddenly, red clouds surround the moon and lightning falls from the sky into Seung-gi's apartment building as it finds its way to Seung-gi's computer. There, the Sandcraft game changes to Hellcraft, and Baphomet informs Seung-gi that his subordinates will copy whatever he builds in the game. Seung-gi takes a look at the new game while Baphomet tells him to show off his skills. Some days later, Baphomet backs several cans of soda as he watches the progress of the new hell. He realizes it's been over 7 days since he assigned Seung-gi with the task, and Seung-gi had already created an extraordinary structure without sleeping. He wondered if Seung-gi or his hatred was remarkable. Moments later, Seung-gi informed Baphomet that the new hell was complete. Baphomet appeared and asked what name he'd chosen for his masterpiece, so Seung-gi informed him it was the Hell of Betrayal. Once he was satisfied with the name, he chose to officially save it as the new map. Afterward, Seung-gi used the door handle for the first time in 3 months. When he stepped out and saw Daejong, he decided it was time for revenge. However, Baphomet warned him he could only imprison people who commit the sin of betrayal after the hell had been built. However, once the conditions are met, the key to hell will open the gates of hell and take all the sinners within its range. Upon hearing this, Seung-gi approaches Daejong, who'd been taking pictures of her new purse. When she noticed Seung-gi, she told him to get rid of his foul stench, or he'd become a nuisance like his mother. Seung-gi looked at the key to hell and saw it had not been activated, so he figured he'd have to wait a few days for her to commit the sin. However, when Daejong began hurling insults at him, he realized he couldn't wait that long to get rid of the hag. Before this, Seung-gi's mother had been sold into marriage at a young age. However, she suffered in her in-laws' house the entire time. Despite this, whenever Seung-gi saw her, she managed to greet him with a smile. On the other hand, his mom suffered bitter tantrums from his dad, who was a walking sack of shit. Seung-gi would cry as he heard his mom getting beat on like a virgin's meat, but she would only ever smile at him, even with a black eye. One day, Namjoon-si kicked her out to make space for Daejong, who he overheard calling Namjoon-si a rich sucker. But when she realized Seung-gi had heard everything, she told him to keep his mouth shut if he didn't want to get tossed out like his mother. Back in the present, Daejong continued about Seung-gi leaving his room when Seung-gi suddenly asked how much it would take for her to leave his dad. Daejong was surprised at Seung-gi's nerve to ask such a question until Seung-gi revealed that he knew his dad's password to all his savings, which are worth nearly $1 billion. Daejong couldn't believe her ears, so Seung-gi offered to show her proof. As Seung-gi headed toward his dad's safe, Daejong realized $1 billion would be like hitting the jackpot in gold digger history. Just then, Seung-gi showed her stacks of cash and gold and suggested she could fly overseas with the money. However, Daejong became suspicious since Seung-gi was basically handing over his future. Meanwhile, Baphomet watched the showdown with popcorn and was surprised even reformed district hoes could be so cautious. However, Seung-gi didn't waver as he planned to pull out the ultimate weapon. Just then, Seung-gi began to cry as he begged Daejong to leave so his mom could return. Daejong figured Seung-gi was really like a little kid, so she grabbed her bag and began stuffing it with her new fortune. However, Seung-gi smiled sheepishly as he knew this would count as a betrayal against his father. Daejong was busy demanding the password to his father's bank account when Seung-gi informed her she wouldn't need it in hell and pulled out the key. When he inserted the key, a large door appeared, shocking Daejong, who watched from the floor. Seung-gi then unlocked the door and multiple tentacles came shooting out to drag Daejong down to hell with them. Once the door shut, Daejong landed in an empty room wondering where she was. Suddenly, the walls began to rumble as they moved toward each other and Daejong screamed for help. Back in the living room, Baphomet asked Seung-gi if he wanted to see Daejong's demise, but Seung-gi looked away and said he was feeling nauseous. Baphomet then moved closer, wondering if Seung-gi felt guilty when he realized the crackhead was actually laughing out of satisfaction. After, Seung-gi throws on his uniform and sees how much weight he's lost from sitting in a corner all these months. Baphomet informed him that it hadn't even been an hour since the last trap, but Seung-gi claimed he didn't want hell to be empty for Baphomet's sake. Even though Baphomet knew Seung-gi was lying through his chapped lips, he agreed. At this, Seung-gi threw on his backpack and suggested they head to school. As they entered the elevator, Baphomet couldn't help but feel excited about hell gradually filling up. Later in school, a crowd formed outside a classroom. When a student asked if a celebrity was around, another student explained that Seung-gi had just returned to school. The students wondered why he would bother coming to school when the gang of bullies had their sights on him. At that moment, the Joker led his gang of bullies down the hallway as the students watched what would happen next. The bullies enter the classroom, and when they spot Seung-gi, they surround him. Baphomet thinks Seung-gi must be popular with how much attention he's drawing, but it's actually quite the opposite. Seung-hwan nags that there's a scratch on his record thanks to Seung-gi, so he tells him to come with them quietly. Moments later, they stand in the boys' bathroom as Seung-hwan asks what Seung-gi intends to do about his record. The kid with grass for hair then explains that Seung-hwan got scolded at home and pulled from a prestigious university. When Seung-gi says nothing in response, one of the boys punches him for staying quiet. As Baphomet watches, he points out that Seung-gi hasn't built any trust with the bullies, so it will be hard for them to commit the sin of betrayal. However, Seung-gi wipes the blood from his lips, determined to go through with his plan. He explains that humans have always used tools to bring down creatures many times their size. In Seung-gi's case, he had the most effective hunting weapon of all. At that moment, the bullies asked what Seung-gi was pulling from his pocket, so he showed them 5 million won. The bullies were surprised, but Seung-hwan insisted it was pointless since they could just steal it from him and beat him. Seung-gi said he didn't mind taking a beating as long as they fulfilled one request, but this angered Seung-hwan, who tried to attack him. However, the lead bully stopped him and suggested they hear Seung-gi out. He grabbed the 5 million won and figured there would be more where it came from, so he asked Seung-gi what his request was. Seung-gi immediately pointed to Seung-hwan and demanded they beat him up together. Seung-hwan couldn't believe his ears, but Seung-gi brought out even more money to motivate the bullies. At this, the bullies grabbed the money and accused Seung-hwan of denying his friendship with Seung-gi. The boys tried to hold him down for the beating, but Seung-hwan breaks free, insisting he wasn't friends with Seung-gi. However, the leader explained they were just trying to earn some pocket money from their new friend. Angered, Seung-hwan turned to Seung-gi and demanded to know how he could do this to a friend. At this, Seung-gi explained that since they're friends, he ought to experience how shitty his life is too. At that, the bullies grab Seung-hwan and toss him aside. The leader then asks Seung-gi for 50,000 won per hit, and Seung-gi agrees to the deal. The bullies immediately start attacking Seung-hwan and counting the hits delivered. As Seung-gi watches, he relishes the sound of someone else getting beat up instead of him. However, he realizes how boring it is and wonders what joy the bullies get in doing this. He then pulls out the hell key, which has been activated. Baphomet watches in amusement as Seung-gi successfully causes division in the group. Seung-gi then sticks out the key as he calls out to the bullies. Once he's got their attention, he tells them to keep bullying in hell as he opens the gates and unleashes the tentacles. The boys immediately get dragged into the fiery gates, but the leader struggles to hang on as he demands to know what's going on. In response, Seung-gi slowly peels his hands away as he remembers all the times he and his gang tormented him for no good reason. Now, Seung-gi was sending them to a place fit for trash as he pushed back the last finger and sent the last bully to hell. The gate closed and Seung-hwan cowered in fear as he watched Seung-gi. Baphomet was curious to see what Seung-gi would do now that one was left, so Seung-gi walked over to Seung-hwan and asked if he was curious about what just happened. He then showed Seung-hwan the key that can open the gates of hell. Seung-hwan asked if he was being spared, making Seung-gi remember all the years they spent being good friends and making memories. At this, Seung-gi admitted that he still considered Seung-hwan his friend, so the hits from the bullies were enough for him. Seung-hwan says that he was just scared of the bullies this whole time, so Seung-gi suggests they try to mend their friendship. As Seung-gi turns to leave, he accidentally drops his key on the ground, which Seung-hwan notices. He remembers Seung-gi calling it the key to hell, so he launches forward and grabs the key, calling Seung-gi a However, when he looks in his hand, he sees it's just an ordinary key, while Seung-gi holds up the real key, which has been activated. Seung-gi says Seung-hwan has no chance at redemption, and moments after, a bright light shines from the bathroom as Seung-hwan's screams fill the air. Afterward, Baphomet applauds Seung-gi for setting up such a clever trick right from the beginning. However, Seung-gi explains the last one was actually a test to give Seung-hwan a chance. Baphomet then laughs as he reminds Seung-gi that everyone suffers equally in hell. Now that he's trapped his enemies, Baphomet suggests they make hell more chaotic. Seung-gi stops to wash his face as Baphomet laments not being able to figure Seung-gi out. He initially thought Seung-gi was out for vengeance, but he seemed to get sentimental when he trapped his classmates. However, Seung-gi explains that he was just thinking of the next plan, and the discomfort he felt was because he felt pathetic for not cleaning out the trash earlier while they ruined his life. This answer amused Baphomet even more, and they left the restroom together. That evening, Seung-gi waited in his apartment while Baphomet spotted his dad approaching. He excitedly informed Seung-gi and asked what kind of trick he was planning to use this time. There was also no trust between them, and he couldn't use the money trick this time since his dad was the source of the money. However, Seung-gi says he didn't need any of those tricks since they wouldn't work. Baphomet asked Seung-gi to give him a spoiler, so Seung-gi said his father ran a small insurance company, so he made a living denying payouts to those who regularly pay insurance premiums. At that moment, his father walks through the door and wonders who his idiot son is talking to. As he turns his back on Seung-gi, Seung-gi pulls out the hell key, which is already activated, meaning his father already betrayed someone at work. Namjoon-si gets angry when he hears Seung-gi talk about him that way, but Seung-gi simply opens the gates of hell. In his final moments, Seung-gi remembers how he always wondered how his dad could be so cruel to his own family. Now Seung-gi figures his father's work made betrayal a routine for him. Once the gates of hell open, Seung-gi says goodbye and watches his father get dragged down to hell. Afterward, Baphomet watches his prisoners on his hell pad, while he asks Seung-gi what his next plan is. Seung-gi explains that his revenge plan is over as he dials a number on his phone. He then reveals he's dialing the police and plans to turn himself in. Later at the police station, Seung-gi reports his parents missing while Baphomet watches. Suddenly, a hell circle appears and a lesser demon informs Baphomet that he's been summoned by Lucifer immediately. Baphomet assumes it must be because of his new hell and gladly heads out since the human realm has gotten boring. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Lucifer and the other demons wait for Baphomet's arrival. When he walks in, Lucifer announces that all 12 candidates for the Master of the New Hell have gathered. When Baphomet looks around, he notices other high-level demons gathered, which is strange since they're all rivals. Lucifer tells Baphomet to take a seat, so Baphomet walks up to a chair, but before he sits, he demands to know why he's been summoned. However, Lucifer gets annoyed and uses his power to sit his bony ass down. Just then, another demon named Gargamel informs Baphomet that they were all forced to sit because they are all rulers of prospective hell. Baphomet wonders what in the literal hell he's talking about, so Lucifer explains that he granted all 12 of them the right to create their own hell. However, he never explicitly stated that the hell they create will actually become the official hell. Another demon named Lizen asks if all 12 of them have their own hell, and Lucifer confirms this. But the kicker is that all 12 demons subcontracted it to a human to make. Upon hearing this, Baphomet realizes they were probably all thinking the same thing because the best hell, the Inferno of Disbelief, was created by a human. Just then, an eyeball demon named Sadius uses his eyes to communicate his question. In response, Lucifer explains that he'll choose the human with the best hell and exterminate all the other hells. All the demons are shocked by this announcement, so Lucifer admits that he craves a fight to the death among the hell creators. Back at the police interrogation room, Seung-gi waits alone. He had reported his father and stepmom missing to cause confusion, but there were more complications than he realized. A report came in about the disappearance of a group of school bullies, making a total of 6 missing persons in one neighborhood, all linked to Seung-gi. However, the reason Seung-gi wasn't cautious from the beginning is because there is no means to catch him. Even though there's link to all 6 missing persons, no one else has seen the opening to hell, and there's no body or weapon to be found. Thanks to a lack of evidence, Seung-gi figures he'll soon be released. At this, an officer reports to his senior, Sang-sik, that they have no evidence, asking what they should do. Sang-sik says they have to let him go but asks to speak with him while the mics are turned off. Sang-sik then walks into the room with Seung-gi and tells him he believes he didn't murder anyone. He then states that he also didn't murder anyone, but he sent them to hell. This catches Seung-gi's attention as he notices Sang-sik's hell key. Sang-sik tells him there are other hell engineers, and when Seung-gi asks if there are more besides him, Sang-sik points out how easy it is to get a confession. Seung-gi realizes he forgot to act because of how suddenly he was approached. He finds it difficult to read Sang-sik, so he decides that if it comes to it, he'll erase his tracks by sending them to hell with a fabricated betrayal. Just then, a fire portal appears in the room and Baphomet steps out just as Gargamel steps out beside Sang-sik. Baphomet tells Gargamel he's surprised their humans have already met, so Gargamel tells him to curb Seung-gi's hostility. Baphomet tells him to knock it off since the games haven't started, so Seung-gi asks if there are really other hell creators like him. Baphomet confirms this and reveals that a death game will soon begin to select one real master of hell. After the reveal, Gargamel tells Sang-sik to let Seung-gi go since he might catch other hell users. Gargamel agrees, stating that he's also guilty of committing the same crime anyway. Baphomet warns that they might end up in a long stalemate if they use their powers right from the beginning, so they agree to go their separate ways. Gargamel lets Seung-gi out of the room, but Seung-gi looks even more frustrated. Back in the room, Gargamel assures Sang-sik not to worry since his crime is more versatile than any other hell, so they can take care of Seung-gi anytime they want. Gargamel agrees, determined to survive till the end so his just society can be formed. Later that night, Seung-gi laments about Gargamel, knowing he was a hell user, which means he could have been arrested or even sent to hell. However, Baphomet warns Seung-gi not to lament to him since he went to the police station on his own. When Seung-gi continues to accuse Baphomet, the demon grabs him by the neck and warns him to know his place, or he'll snatch his soul like that throat goat X snatched yours. When Baphomet lets him go, he explains that he was also unaware that other demons created hell or that they would be forced to play a death game. Baphomet burns in anger, remembering how he's been cleaning up after Lucifer for the last 500 years. He then asks if Seung-gi thinks he can survive to the end. To be sure, Seung-gi asks to know the rules of the game and everything he missed while he was in custody. At this, Baphomet insists it'll be easier to show him and sticks 2 fingers inside Seung-gi. Seung-gi starts screaming in pain as his vision goes dark. When he opens his eyes, he sees Lucifer picking up right where he stopped in the earlier meeting. A demon named Lamb kisses Lucifer's ass by claiming the battle was an excellent idea. Lucifer explains that the game will involve the human hell users sending each other to hell. Since they're all ignorant of each other's criteria for sins, they'll have to rely on their wisdom to send each other to hell. Lamb then likens it to a game of tag where no one knows the tagger and only one will be left in the end. Lucifer agrees and explains that this way, the winner will have the most universal hell. Lamb asks what other rules there are, so Lucifer says they can only help the humans with their innate abilities and not the powers he gave them by his authority. However, any other cheap methods are fine as long as they send each other to hell. Back in the present, Seung-gi realizes that the hell users have no choice because if they refuse to play, someone will simply send them to hell anyway. Baphomet confirms this and says it's the same for him because if only one hell remains, the demons tied to the other hells will die. Seung-gi doesn't really care what happens to him since going to someone else's hell would just be karma, but he has one last concern. He asks Baphomet what would happen to the people in his hell if it disappears. When Baphomet says they'll disappear with the hell, Seung-gi insists that he can't give up easily because his traitors don't deserve an easy death. At this, Baphomet realizes Seung-gi is back crazy and cares more about his enemies' suffering than his own life. Seung-gi then reminds him that the essence of hell is to cause eternal pain anyway. Upon hearing this, Baphomet realizes his dreams might come true with this lunatic by his side. He officially acknowledges Seung-gi as his comrade, and they shake on it. Unknown to them, Demon Sadius was watching them at the same time. He shared his power with his hell user, Min-ki, who was glad they had already found their first target. Meanwhile, Seung-gi writes a summary of all the rules Lucifer listed. When Baphomet takes a look, he says it'll remain correct unless Lucifer changes his mind and adds another rule. After this, Seung-gi asks what kind of help Baphomet can provide aside the authority. Baphomet explains that the authority refers to abilities granted by Lucifer like the ability to travel between the mortal realm and hell, the hellfire that he can emit from his body, and the authority to command low-ranking demons. However, each demon is born with a unique ability, which means there are more variables than each other's hell sins. When Seung-gi asks for Baphomet's ability, he says he can detect death. Long ago, when he was just Scooby-Doo's skeleton, he had the role of identifying people who were to come to hell and leading them there. Before Seung-gi could find out more, he heard a knock on the door. When he went over to see who it was, he saw a girl on the screen who suddenly started stripping off her clothes. Fish lips Seung-gi went red all over, but he told her to leave before he called the police. He turned off the screen and turned to face Baphomet, who seemed to catch a whiff of something. Once he recognized the scent of death, Baphomet explained that the woman outside had come to take his life. Seung-gi suddenly realized that since the woman outside had no idea who he was, she was definitely a hell user. Outside, Min-ki pulled out her hell key, which had activated from the sin of lust. Now all she had to do was break the door down and throw him into hell. At that moment, Sadius came out of hiding to gloat with her as she praised his observation skills. Min-ki then begins banging at the lock to get in. Inside, Seung-gi realizes Min-ki must have fulfilled the conditions to activate the key. Since the only thing she did was flash the entrance to her milk factory, Seung-gi figures the sin must be lust. At this, Seung-gi asks Baphomet if this counts as a betrayal since he didn't know she was a hell user when he answered the intercom. Unfortunately, Baphomet says it's too shallow, and a betrayal only occurs if the person abandons their faith. Seung-gi figured it wouldn't be that easy and begins to think while Baphomet is surprised at how calm he is. Seung-gi then explains that his only hope is to make Min-ki believe that his hell can be activated the moment she opens the door. With that, Seung-gi warns Min-ki that she'll fall into hell if she comes in. Min-ki figures he's bluffing and continues to hammer away till she makes a hole in the door. When she sees he isn't running or begging for his life, she hesitates, making Seung-gi confident that she's bought it. Seung-gi then explains that since he's a hermit, logically, the name of his hell is Hell of Invasion. As Min-ki continues to hesitate, Seung-gi monologues about his simple, but brilliant trick since Lucifer never said they couldn't lie about the nature of their hell. Baphomet is impressed with how quickly Seung-gi was able to make up his trick. However, Min-ki knew the possibility of this being a bluff was 90%. However, on the off chance that the story is real, the moment she opens the door, Seung-gi would activate his key to hell. Confused, Min-ki decides to weigh her options. On the one hand, she could insert only the key through the door and activate it, but merely inserting the key could establish the sin of invasion, and she has no idea if her key would work without seeing Seung-gi. On the other hand, if Min-ki retreats, Seung-gi will remember this attack, and since he has figured out her condition, he could use it against her, which means this is checkmate. When Min-ki can't decide what to do, Seung-gi suggests that they form an alliance. Min-ki thinks this is a dumb idea since there's no hope of a joint victory, which means they'll definitely betray each other. Seung-gi then suggests they maintain the alliance till they whittle down the number since it would be daunting to take on all 10 alone. Min-ki figures it would be hard to continue alone in the long run, and if she refuses Seung-gi's offer, he might reveal information about her hell, which ruins her element of surprise. Min-ki turns to Sadius for advice, but he's just as confused. Just then, Seung-gi calls out his number and suggests they form their alliance over the phone so she won't have to invade and meet his condition. He then tells her to leave before the police arrive and to call if he accepts the condition. At this, Min-ki inputs his number and starts to walk away, frustrated that the hell users won't be so easy to take down. Meanwhile, Seung-gi sighed in relief as he almost got eliminated right at the start. Baphomet figured there'd be a demon that could detect hell users, but he never thought Seung-gi would be the first target. However, he commends Seung-gi for thinking fast, while Seung-gi commends his power for not being as useless as it sounded. That night, Min-ki sent Seung-gi a message, agreeing to the alliance. Seung-gi is satisfied because if she tries to betray him, he can send her to hell, which is one hell of an advantage. Pun intended. Meanwhile, at the police station, Sang-sik conducts a search on missing persons, so Gargamon commends him for using his position to find the hell users. However, Sang-sik laments that there were over 1,500 missing person reports in the last month, so it wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Just then, Sang-sik noticed another officer and asked him why he was working so late. The officer said he was just stocking up some supplies, but as he opened his desk, he remembered the report of a disturbance at Seung-gi's apartment earlier. He says a crazy female had reportedly bashed the door in, but when officers arrived on the scene, Seung-gi himself was fine. At this, Sang-sik thinks to himself that the girl must be a hell user too, and is grateful Seung-gi is already revealing more users. Sang-sik then asks for the footage of the crazy girl, and in addition, he asks the office to tail Seung-gi for the week. Meanwhile, the first dropout of the death game had occurred between Lam's hell user, Noong-han, and some talking bag of bones, though the old man begged to be spared, insisting he didn't commit sins, but Noong-han explained that existence itself can be a sin. For the act of wasting oxygen since he's useless, Noong-han opens the gate to his hell and locks him up. After this, the demon in charge of the old man began to fade from existence, when Noong-han stepped on him to speed up the process. Lam warned him about disgracing the corpse of a high-ranking demon, but Noong-han interrupted with that Hisoka stare, warning him to do his job properly. Lam almost forgot who the real demon was here when Noong-han claimed he was simply joking. He then looked over the city as he planned to catch the other 10 users so he could create a utopia. For the next 3 days, Seung-gi did nothing but sleep like a fool. Eventually, Baphomet asked why they had done nothing after forming an alliance since the goal was to be the last man standing. Seung-gi responded by saying he was also getting restless, confusing Baphomet even more. Seung-gi explained that in the last stages of a death game, there's no time to rest or gather information, so it's better he rest up now. Secondly, if even he is running out of patience, someone else is bound to make a mistake by now. Just then, his phone rings and it's Min-ki calling. When he picks up, Min-ki scolds him for going Mia after forming an alliance. At this, Seung-gi claims he was strategically doing nothing just in case someone else would foolishly commit the sin of invasion. Min-ki then informs him that there was an incident while he was MIA. She says she'll send him a link and suggests they meet in public since it's something that requires moving together. When he gets off the phone, Seung-gi clicks on the YouTube link, which leads to a video of a girl who looks like she's possessed by Chucky. There, Gagaka explains that she's part of a death game, but since no one wants to make the first move, she's revealing her identity to make it more interesting. She then asks if they want her key or want to target other Hell users targeting her from behind. Either way, she offers up an invitation to her house and promises to send the address by midnight. Baphomet then asks Seung-gi if it's finally time to move, so Seung-gi confirms, saying they'd finally be able to take out some of the competition. That afternoon, Seung-gi waits at a crowded cafe for Min-ki, who figures he must be preventing her from using her key. However, Seung-gi insists he's doing her a solid by leaving his apartment so she can't commit the sin of invasion. Min-ki brings up the issue of the video and Seung-gi is sure other users must have seen it. Min-ki agrees and asks what Seung-gi is planning to do. Seung-gi realizes he has to play it cool so she doesn't doubt his sin of invasion due to his confidence. He reluctantly agrees to go, claiming it's a risk since his sin is rotten when his location changes. Min-ki doesn't seem to suspect a thing and suggests they wait for the address to be uploaded. Suddenly, Seung-gi notices Sang-sik and his demon approaching and wonders what's going on. Min-ki turns around to see what the problem is and is shocked to see another Hell user. Sang-sik then addresses them casually and asks what they're plotting in broad daylight. Seung-gi and Min-ki remain frozen in shock as Sang-sik takes a seat and reaches for one of the drinks. Seung-gi figures that since Sang-sik doesn't even know their sins, it means they've met the conditions for his hell. At this, Sang-sik finishes his drink and suddenly tells them to freeze as Min-ki reaches into her bag and Seung-gi pulls out his hell key. Sang-sik shows them his hell key and warns them that they'll die if they move. Meanwhile, Gagaka writes down her address and prepares to release it when her demon, Jong, asks if it's really a good idea. Gagaka then slides across her room and points to the monitors, assuring him she's already set the stage to their advantage and Jong's ability is their cheat. Back at the cafe, Seung-gi wonders how he could possibly have triggered Sang-sik's hell condition when he'd been careful not to commit even a single sin. That's when it hits him that the key didn't react to him the last time he was at the police station, so maybe it was reacting to Min-ki now. However, since Min-ki looked just as confused, Seung-gi came up with another idea. Seung-gi stood up and told Min-ki to head outside the cafe with him. Sang-sik reminded him what would happen if he didn't obey him, but Seung-gi insisted he was bluffing. He figured Sang-sik must have planted someone who committed his sin inside the cafe. Since his key was inside his jacket, the only reason he didn't check it when he entered was because he knew it would respond. Just then, Seung-gi spots a man seated close by tweaking like a virgin on Valentine's Day. Seung-gi quickly approached him and asked if Sang-sik had threatened him into being there. Min-ki quickly caught on and was outraged when Seung-gi told him he'd picked the wrong people to mess with. The man at the bar told Sang-sik he'd done everything he was asked and quickly rushed off, leaving Sang-sik laughing from amusement. Seung-gi wondered what Sang-sik could be laughing about, so Sang-sik told him he'd either grown quite a bit, or maybe he was overwhelmed the last time at the police station. Sang-sik then grabs them by the shoulders and assures them it was a test so he wouldn't ally with dumb b****s. Seung-gi insists he's just acting tough because his plan didn't work, but Sang-sik insists they sit and listen to his proposal. After this, they suffer an awkward pause as Sang-sik drinks Min-ki's coffee. Min-ki then asks Seung-gi if he really plans to listen to a conman, but Seung-gi has his reasons for remaining seated. He figured that since Sang-sik was a detective, he could figure out Hell users based on his data. He could also forcibly detain or stalk using public authority. Unlike everyone else who depends on a single card of Hell's ability, Sang-sik is starting with 2 cards, and with the upcoming raid on Gagaka, An alliance might not be a bad idea. At this, Seung-gi says he'll accept the alliance if Sang-sik reveals his sin. Sang-sik refuses to reveal his sin, so Min-ki insists they can't possibly form an alliance with him. In response, Sang-sik offers to give them good information instead. He points out that the number of people they've sent to hell is probably in single digits, while he's sent 117 people to hell. Seung-gi and Min-ki scream at the outrageous number, disturbing the others in the cafe. Sang-sik continues by saying he's experimented with the key and knows when it activates, at what distance it can be used, and how many people it can put in at once. Seung-gi and Min-ki finally realize why his number is so high, so Sang-sik offers to give them the data if they join his side. A moment later, Seung-gi and Min-ki leave with the data, so Gargamon asks Sang-sik if he's given away too much. At this, Sang-sik smiles to himself and explains that the book he gave them has some of the numbers slightly changed. With that, if they decide to go against him, he can swallow them whole. Later that night, Seung-gi and Min-ki wait at a playground. When Seung-gi sees they have over 3 hours before the address drops, he figures it would be good to build some teamwork. He then tells Min-ki he has some questions for her, and she tells him to go ahead. Seung-gi asks if she can use her tracking ability now so they can identify Gagaka's location before the others. At this, Min-ki gets up and grabs a stick to show him how it works. Her ability allows her to share the sight of the nearest tracking target, which means she can only find the nearest hell user. Seung-gi figures that she only caught him because he was the closest to her, and since he's right beside her, it would be a waste. As for the cooldown, Min-ki says it's every 12 hours for 5 minutes. Seung-gi figures that if Min-ki knew he wouldn't leave his house, Min-ki probably used her ability once every 12 hours while moving. However, she didn't make contact as she was more cautious after fighting with Seung-gi. Seung-gi confronts her about the people she's tracked without telling him, which catches Min-ki by surprise. However, when she remembers how he protected her in the cafe, she figures she has a debt to repay. After taking a deep breath, Min-ki revealed that there were 2 successful tracks. One was going through immigration at the airport, and the other was in the boardroom of the QS conglomerate. In summary, one is a foreigner, and the other is a higher up in a conglomerate, but since they didn't look in a mirror, she can't confirm their faces. When Seung-gi looks at Min-ki suspiciously, Min-ki explains that she didn't hide the information with the intention of breaking their alliance. In return, Seung-gi offers to share details about his ability. He explains that Baphomet has the ability to smell the scent of death, which lets him know if someone has raised the death flag against him. Since it could be used to kind of predict the future, Min-ki figures it's not a bad skill. After this, they plan to rest separately and later gather around the address Gagaka posts. Before leaving, Seung-gi stretches out his hand for a fist bump and tells Min-ki to survive so the people in her hell don't get an easy death. Upon hearing this, Min-ki flashes back to a time when her sneaky link set up a camera to capture them bumping bellies. Even though Min-ki didn't like it, the boy insisted. The next day in school, some boys started clowning her based on the video they saw. When she reached her locker, it was decorated with insults calling her a hoe. After getting her hell key, the rotten d*** tried begging for his life, but it was already too late and she sent him to hell. After remembering this, Min-ki determines to make the boy suffer for the rest of his life, and they fist bump on it. She then tells Seung-gi to live well as she walks away. Later, Seung-gi looks through the data from Sang-sik when Baphomet rises from the floor. He tells Seung-gi to stop forcing him to hide underground as his feet hurt so much. Seung-gi reminds him that hell users can see each other's demons, so his presence can give him away. He tells Baphomet to take one for the team and only show himself at home. At this, Baphomet asks why he's trusting Min-ki so much if he's so cautious. Seung-gi then reminds him he lied about his sin, plus they'll need Sang-sik for the raid. Meanwhile, another alliance had also formed between Demons Lamb, Bamfir, and Kilius. However, the Hell users were not on equal footing. Instead, the alliance was mostly Nonghan holding Yun-hai and Jong Cheol on a tight leash. At that moment, Nonghan saw that Gagaka had finally dropped the address. At this, he instructed Jong Cheol to drive to the address while he informed Yun-hai she'd be the first to go in. Yun-hai demanded to know why she was being used as bait, so Nonghan held up his hell key to remind her that she was being held as hostage for being incompetent. He then warned them to follow his orders if they wanted to breathe one more day. Jong Choi asked if he would let them go after they finished the job, but Nonghan said he'd let them go when they become competent. Moments later, the group drove down to the address while Sang-sik met with Seung-gi and Min-ki. There, Sang-sik asked if they'd read the notebook he had given them, so Seung-gi offered to summarize its key points. First, the number of people they can send to hell at once is 5, and once they've opened the hell gate, there's a cooldown of 1 minute where the hell gate cannot be reopened. The maximum range for the hell gate to suck in sinners is 10 meters even if the target has been confirmed. Min-ki then adds that even if they've sinned, if the hell user doesn't recognize the target as a sinner, they won't go in. Sang-sik is impressed by their revision and suggests they go over their plan. The first objective is to visually confirm the identity of the hell users, while the second objective is to gather clues to infer the sins of the hell users. The third objective is surviving, so they don't need to focus on reducing the numbers. Min-ki wonders if that's a good idea, so Sang-sik reminds her there's no reward for sending hell users to hell, so why take the risk? However, if they have an easy opportunity, they're free to do so. He then hands over walkie-talkies so they can communicate any unusual activity or the identity of hell users. Meanwhile, in the car parked nearby, Noong-han stakes out the building with his binoculars. Jong Choi points out that an attack can come from anywhere and suggests they wait for other hell users to target her. When Noong-han insists they need to reduce the number of hell users, Yoon-hae and Jong Choi ask why. He then reminds them that he's already sent one hell user to hell, which he showed them on his tablet. After sending the old man, he learned that you get an additional ability for eliminating hell users. After hearing this, Yoon-hae and Jong Choi realize the advantage of eliminating hell users at the beginning of the game. If they can get an additional ability, they can break free from Noong-han or become his equal. However, Noong-han grinned as he knew it was simply a lie to control his slaves. If there was such a reward, the organizer would have announced it. Back when Noong-han had defeated the first demon, he asked Lam if he had gotten any kind of reward for it. When Lam told him nothing had changed, Noong-han figured he didn't need to get his hands dirty directly. He planned to use pawns to deal with the next hell user and get information about their hells. When the person sends his paws to hell, he'll learn their weakness and use it to turn them into his new slave. Then, he only needs to repeat the process till there's only one slave left. At that point, he'll just end the slave and become the final victor. For now, Noong-han needed to keep a poker face so they wouldn't catch on. He informs them that he's only trying to make his allies more capable. Then he hands over a camera to continue the plan. Later, Gagaka casually relaxing in her room when a rope appears outside her window. Yoon-hae lowers herself down and busts into the room, startling Gagaka, who was caught off guard. Yoon-hae came in using a grappling hook from another floor, and her hell key was already glowing. Bamfir told Yoon-hae to finish things quickly, so Yoon-hae got excited to get her extra ability. She activates the Hell of Complacency and bats begin to swarm around her. Yoon-hae explains that she's guilty of revealing her address because she is overconfident in her abilities. At that moment, Yoon-hae turns the key to the gate, and skeleton hands bust out to drag Gagaka to hell. However, after one touch, the hands begin to retreat, shocking both Yoon-hae and Bamfir, who wonder what the hell is wrong with the key. That's when Gagaka reveals that their target was wrong and peels off her face to reveal he's actually Jong in disguise. As Yoon-hae and Bamfir stare in confusion, the real Gagaka activates her Hell of Intrusion from the closet. At that moment, Yoon-hae got yanked by a series of hanging ropes, dragging her to hell, and Bamfir was powerless to stop it. Yoon-hae then flashed back to how she got into this mess. She used to work as a trainee to be an idol. One day after practice, she felt depressed as she looked at the other idols who had made it while she remained a trainee. Just then, a recruiter arrived to announce their next pick for the idol, but they announced a girl named Yule instead. Yoon-hae was outraged when she heard this and demanded to know how Yule was picked over her. However, the recruiter insisted it was a decision from above that couldn't be changed and told her to celebrate instead of taking it so hard. Later, Yoon-hae cried on a staircase when someone offered her a napkin to clean up. It turned out to be Yule, who advised her to perform better at the audition next time. She even suggested Yoon-hae just wasn't talented since she'd been a trainee for 7 years and told her to find something else to do as it was getting embarrassing. That night, Yoon-hae drowned her sorrows in booze, knowing her ops had used luck and connections. As she watched Yule's performance, she knew the had gawked her way to this position. It was after this that she got approached by Bamfir, who handed over the power to create her own hell. However, when she tried it on Noong-han, the key didn't work. Noong-han informed her that since her hell is the Hell of Complacency, she must have thought he was complacent. Yoon Hai figured it checked out since he was an executive of a large corporation, but this only made Nung Han burst into laughter. He insisted complacency was for people who couldn't measure their own worth, while he was simply confident. In the present, Yoon Hai concluded that she was also complacent in depending on Nung Han. As she got flung into Gagaku's hell, Yoon Hai was officially eliminated, closing the gates. Bamfir cursed her luck as she began to disappear. Her last word was to tell Jong how screwed up he was. Back then, Jong would turn into Lucifer as a party trick. He figured Gagaku had been dying to use his trick, so Gagaku told him to keep throwing other users to hell as they gave each other high fives. Outside, Seung-gi noticed the bright green flash and asked the others if they'd seen it too. Min-ki confirms it and says it must have been the gate of hell, which means at least one person has been eliminated. Seung-gi immediately goes into overdrive as he remembers that Sang-sik's notebook claimed the cooldown period after using the key was 1 minute. This means he has a 1-minute window where the hell user can't harm anyone, but he wasn't sure he should go in. Before Seung-gi can make any moves, a hand grabs him from behind, and Sang-sik tells him it isn't worth it. Seung-gi asks what they should do, so Sang-sik tells him to report the sighting to him since he's a detective. Seung-gi initially wonders why until he realizes Sang-sik is trying to get into Gagaku's house by using his detective authority. The hell user won't easily send Sang-sik to hell because they might trigger other officers to swarm in and arrest the suspect. Sang-sik then tells Seung-gi and Min-ki to prevent other hell users from entering the building while he takes care of things inside. As he walks away, Seung-gi realizes Sang-sik made even quicker judgments than he did. The reason why they planned their operation passively was so another hell user would begin the battle and give them a chance to intervene, but now Seung-gi was debating if he should send Sang-sik to hell. Meanwhile, Nung Han sees Yoon Hai has been taken out, but it doesn't matter now that he knows the nature of Gagaku's hell. It was time for him to move. Who will win in the face-off between Seung-gi's team and Nung Han's? Comment, "I'd like to send my ex to hell," if want to find out in part 2. Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.